I want to thank everybody who likes, shares, and subscribes to my channel. A lot of my content has been pretty short, and I do that on purpose because I know most people don't have the time or the attention span to go beyond maybe 3 to 5 minutes. So this will be a slightly longer video than normal, but hopefully, I can kind of build my way up to maybe some longer videos depending on the interest. So, in some of my previous videos, I have talked about the GATE program, and I don't know who else maybe out there that was part of that when they were in school. It was a program that it was a big deal in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, and it uses some of the premises that some of the same ideas that MK Ultra. And if you're not familiar with that, I highly encourage you to do a little research because I think you'll find a lot of interesting information about how the CIA has uh, been able to mind control people. And, TV programming is called programming for a reason. I'll just leave it at that. But gifted and talented, from my understanding, was to see who had telepathic abilities, astral projection, remote viewing, that sort of thing. And they wanted to see how they could possibly control these individuals for their personal use, or if you didn't necessarily want to fall in line with what they had to offer, then basically see what kind of stress you could take on. And as a kid, I remember being bullied quite a bit. And, it was always in jest. It was like, my friends would sit there and make a really off comment, and they would, constantly, oh, quit being so sensitive. I was just joking. And it's like, no, like most people aren't going to say that even as a joke. Some of the crap that, was said. And, whatever. I get it. It was the 80s and 90s. I'm a Gen Xer, so it's like I've built that callus up, so it's not like a big sensitivity. However, like I look at my generation and I see what a bunch of insensitive assholes we are. Cuz we are. Cuz we were given that attitude when we were growing up. You had to take care of yourself. A lot of people were latchkey kids. Some people, I mean, like latchkey kids, basically you let yourself in the house. If you lived in a town where you didn't have to lock your door, you just let yourself in. But, we were left independent of parents for most of our childhood, if not all of it. And when they were home, it wasn't a treat, it was nothing but abuse. It was a bunch of unhealed people from the abuse that they got or the neglect that they got from their parents. So they figured they'd go ahead and, basically unload that on us. And I mean, like, I'm sure there's many of you out there that can identify with being sent to the grocery store with a check and an envelope or a list to do the grocery shopping. I know I had to do it. The nice thing was the grocery store was right across the street from my house, so I didn't really have to do a whole lot of walking. But nonetheless, I was a pretty independent kid by the time I was 10. I was babysitting my siblings at that point. So the amount of damage that was done to our generation, and we all just want to sit there and be all like, oh, let's, quit being so sensitive. We were Gen X. We're supposed, we were built tough and all this other stuff. And I'm saying, why are we putting on that front? Like most of us feel like shit. Like we'll joke around, but that's a wound, like that's you're basically just laughing it off because you know how shitty it was. And we need to all collectively stop doing that. Okay? Let's give a shit. Let's try being a generation that gives a shit. I'm not saying go out and care about everybody's problem, but I'm saying give a shit about yourself. Like, our parents did not give a shit about us. We were wandering around. They had a fucking TV message telling you it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? That's messed up, man. You really think about that. That's messed up. And we seem to think it's okay to keep doing that. Why? Like, why do we keep doing that to ourselves, thinking that, oh, we're just gonna go ahead and put like a little band-aid on this gashing, bashing wound that keeps getting hit over and over again. It's exhausting because then you're guilted in by your boomer parents, your millennial or Gen Z kids. Oh, we don't need to save more. We need to stop. Everything's just expensive. There's a greed problem, all this stuff. And I agree with them. There's a huge greed problem. But it all stems from these wounds that none of us want to heal. It felt like shit being left home alone and not having anybody to call on. You had to figure it out on the fly. And cool, yes, I learned a lot of life lessons. I can be completely independent because of it. But it sucks because trying to relate to people and trying to even have a reasonable conversation is impossible now. Everybody seems to think that their view is so different, and it's not. Just because you use different words to describe the same situation doesn't mean you didn't experience the same situation. Find the common ground, for crying out loud. Everybody wants to sit there and talk about, yeah, we're unique in our own way, okay? But at the end of the day, when you start looking at things from that person's perspective, you realize that, okay, we're just saying the same shit. We're just using different words because we've whitewashed our language so much because we're so afraid of offending people. For what? Why? So that they can feel better about doing shit things and not be held accountable? Is that why we've gone ahead and made everything so politically correct these days? Because our feelings might get hurt if we hear the truth? Oh, I know it is. I mean, it's a rhetorical question, quite honestly. But seriously, why? Why are we so afraid to offend people? It'll wake them up. Stop sitting in your little comfy chair and getting all pissed off and do something about it instead. Because like I've gotten to the point now where I question everybody who wants to get pissed off at me. What are you gonna do about it? If I comment about something, let's even just talk about Israel and all the stuff that's going on over there. Okay, let's just use that. I know it's a polarizing topic, but let's face this together. Why are you getting mad about people who live thousands of miles away from you? Okay, they need to figure that shit out on their own, just like we have to figure our shit out too. And my next question is, what are you going to do about it besides sit behind a screen and type your little crap all over, thinking that's going to do something because maybe somebody else will see it and go do it? Why aren't you doing something about it? Go hop a plane. Go over there and help them yourself. Go use your resources to do that. Why are you expecting someone else to go fight your battle for you? You're no different than the government at that point. Oh, wait, that's right. You're hoping that by electing people that somehow something is going to get done over there. It's not. And quite honestly, it's none of our business. Let them deal with their problems. We'll deal with ours. We have plenty of our own problems here in our own country. We don't need to be worrying about everybody else in the world until we fix our own shit. If we can't even have our own shit right, what business do we have being somewhere else meddling in their stuff? Seriously. Let's stop with the fake crap. You don't care about that. All you care about is how people see you. You want to be seen as the person that gives a shit. Oh, she cares about all these causes. And it's bullshit because you're not actually doing anything. You're just whining about it like a 3-year-old, hoping that someone more mature will go take care of it like a parent would. If you want to see change, go do it. Stop whining. Okay? But like a lot of this has to do with all of the programming on TV. Let's pass the buck. Let's stop. Okay? If you're going to whine about it online, I want you to take 5 minutes to reflect on it before you post anything and ask yourself, what am I physically going to go do about it that's going to make a difference before I start whining about it to someone? Because otherwise, you're no different than a toddler.